The room was bathed in the warm glow of the afternoon sun, its rays filtering through the sheer curtains. Mark sat on the couch, his fingers lightly tracing the braille pages of a novel he had just begun. Blind since the accident 3 years ago, he had learned to navigate life with courage and resilience, relying on his heightened senses to make up for his lack of sight. But there were things even his acute senses couldn't detect. "Hey, babe," his wife, Laura, called out cheerfully as she walked into the room. Mark smiled at the sound of her voice. It was his anchor, his constant in a world of darkness. "How was your day?" he asked, setting the book aside. "Busy as always," she replied, bending down to kiss his cheek. He caught the faint scent of perfume, one that wasn't her usual choice. It was sweeter, more daring. "You're wearing a new perfume?" he asked, tilting his head curiously. Laura hesitated for the briefest of moments, but her voice came smooth and steady. "Oh, yeah. I picked it up on sale. Thought I'd try something new." Mark nodded, brushing off the nagging feeling that something was slightly off. Over the following weeks, subtle changes began to creep into their life. Laura was suddenly more attentive to her appearance, often claiming she had work meetings or errands that kept her out late. When she was home, her phone buzzed incessantly, though she always kept it face down. Mark's instincts told him something was wrong, but he didn't want to believe it. Laura was his rock, the one who had stood by him during his darkest moments. The thought of her being unfaithful seemed inconceivable. One evening, as Mark sat on the couch listening to the soft jazz playing from the speaker, Laura returned home with someone. "This is risky," a man's voice whispered, low and hesitant. "Relax," Laura replied, her voice carrying a mix of amusement and defiance. "He won't know." Mark froze, his senses going into overdrive. He recognized the subtle creak of the floorboards as they stepped closer. The man was heavier than Laura, his steps more deliberate. Mark could smell a musky cologne mingling with Laura's perfume, a scent foreign to their home. "Laura," Mark called out, keeping his voice calm. "Are you back?" There was a pause. Then Laura's voice, a little too bright, answered. "Yeah, just grabbing something from the kitchen. Be right there." The man's presence lingered, silent but palpable. Mark felt a rush of anger and heartbreak. How could she bring someone into their home, into the space they had built together? When Laura returned alone, she sat beside Mark, placing a hand on his knee. "I was just tidying up a bit," she said casually, her tone betraying none of the tension he sensed. "Did you have someone over?" Mark asked directly, his voice steady but firm. Laura stiffened for a moment before laughing lightly. "Of course not, honey. You must be imagining things." Mark's heart ached. He wanted to believe her, but the evidence was there, even if he couldn't see it. In the days that followed, Mark started piecing things together. He began using his heightened senses to pick up clues. A faint whiff of that unfamiliar cologne, a pair of scuffed shoes in the entryway that didn't belong to either of them, hushed voices when Laura thought he was out of earshot. One day, when Laura left for one of her errands, Mark called a friend, Jake, for help. Jake arrived within minutes, his loyalty unwavering. Together, they devised a plan to confirm what Mark already knew in his heart. The confrontation, when it came, was devastating. Laura's betrayal was laid bare, and Mark's world, already darkened by blindness, felt even more shattered. But he refused to let it break him entirely. "I may not be able to see Laura," he said with quiet strength, "but I deserve someone who respects me enough to stay honest, even in the dark." Laura left that evening, and though the house felt emptier without her, Mark knew he had made the right choice. He was determined to rebuild his life, this time with people who valued trust and loyalty above all else. Mark's days after Laura's departure were a mix of sorrow and rediscovery. The silence in the house was deafening, but it was also a canvas for a new chapter. Jake became a regular visitor, bringing warmth and companionship that Mark desperately needed. Together, they tackled everything from fixing small appliances to rearranging the furniture to make the space feel new again. One evening, as they sat together, Mark opened up. "You know," he began, his fingers idly tracing the edge of his coffee cup. "I always thought I could sense everything around me. But with Laura, I missed it. I missed the signs." Jake leaned forward. "It's not about missing the signs, Mark. It's about trust. You trusted her, and she betrayed that. That's on her, not you." Mark nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. Jake was right. His blindness wasn't the weakness Laura had exploited. It was her inability to value the loyalty they had built. Weeks turned into months, and Mark began rebuilding his confidence. He started taking long walks through the park, cane in hand, letting the fresh air and the sounds of nature remind him that the world was still full of beauty. He joined a local support group for people with visual impairments, where he met others who shared their stories of triumphs and struggles. One day, during a group meeting, a woman named Emily shared her story. She had lost her sight as a child but had grown into a fierce advocate for the blind community, running workshops and leading community events. Her voice was warm and full of life, and Mark found himself drawn to her energy. After the meeting, Mark approached her. "Emily, your story was incredible," he said. "You've done so much for the community. How do you keep that drive?" Emily laughed softly. "Because I've learned that our worth isn't tied to what we've lost. It's about what we choose to build. And besides," she added, "life is too short to dwell on people or situations that hold us back." Her words stayed with Mark. They began spending more time together, sharing their experiences and encouraging one another. Emily introduced him to new hobbies, like adaptive cooking and tandem cycling, and Mark showed her the joys of Braille literature and sensory music sessions. Their friendship blossomed into something deeper. Emily's presence was a stark contrast to the betrayal he had endured with Laura. She was honest, compassionate, and saw Mark for who he truly was, a resilient man with a heart full of love to give. One evening, as they sat on a park bench listening to the sounds of the city, Mark turned to her. "You've helped me see the world again, Emily," he said. Emily smiled, her hand brushing against his. "And you've reminded me that even in darkness, there's light." Mark's journey had come full circle. Though his heart had been broken, he had found the strength to trust again, to love again. And this time, he knew he was building something real, something that would stand the test of time. As the seasons changed, so did Mark's life. His relationship with Emily grew into a bond of unwavering support and mutual respect. Together, they found joy in the simplest moments, sharing cups of tea, exploring sensory art exhibits, and even collaborating on projects to advocate for accessibility in their community. Mark's confidence surged. He began teaching Braille classes at the local community center, something he'd never imagined himself doing. He also started writing a memoir, encouraged by Emily, who said his story could inspire others to overcome their challenges. One afternoon, as they prepared for an event at the community center, Emily turned to Mark with an idea. "Have you ever thought about sharing your story more publicly? Maybe giving a talk?" Mark hesitated. "I don't know, Emily. Writing is one thing, but speaking in front of a crowd, what if I mess up?" Emily placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Mark, your voice is powerful. You've faced more than most people can imagine, and you've come out stronger. People need to hear that." Encouraged by her faith in him, Mark agreed. His first speaking engagement was nerve-wracking but deeply rewarding. He shared his journey of loss, betrayal, and resilience with an audience that hung on his every word. By the end of the talk, the room erupted in applause, and Mark felt a new sense of purpose. After the event, a young woman approached him. "Your story really touched me," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been struggling with my own challenges, and hearing how you rebuilt your life gives me hope." Mark smiled, realizing that his pain had been transformed into a source of inspiration for others. As his speaking engagements grew, so did his relationship with Emily. They celebrated each other's successes and provided comfort during setbacks. Emily's optimism balanced Mark's occasional doubts, while Mark's calm and steady presence grounded Emily's fiery passion for advocacy. One evening, after a particularly successful event. Mark and Emily walked through the park where they had first confessed their feelings for each other. The night was cool, and the scent of blooming flowers filled the air. Mark stopped suddenly, his heart racing. He reached for Emily's hands, holding them tightly. "Emily," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves, "I never thought I'd find someone who could see me for who I am, beyond my blindness, beyond my scars. You've shown me that love doesn't need eyes. It needs understanding, patience, and trust. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Emily's breath caught, and she squeezed his hands. "Mark, you've taught me that love isn't about what we've lost, but about what we can build together. I can't imagine a life without you in it." Mark smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "So, is that a yes?" Emily laughed through happy tears. "That's absolutely a yes." Their wedding was a small, intimate affair, filled with laughter, music, and the warmth of loved ones. Mark's friend Jake stood by his side as best man, proud of how far his friend had come. Emily walked down the aisle in a dress Mark couldn't see, but could imagine through her radiant smile and the tears in her voice as she said, "I do." Together, they embarked on a life of shared dreams and unwavering partnership. Mark continued to inspire others through his writing and speeches, while Emily expanded her advocacy work, often with Mark by her side. Their love story became a testament to resilience and the belief that even in the darkest moments, there's always a light waiting to guide you home. Mark and Emily's married life blossomed into a partnership that inspired everyone around them. Their home became a sanctuary, not just for themselves, but for friends, neighbors, and people seeking guidance in the face of adversity. Together, they transformed Mark's house into a welcoming space for gatherings, community meetings, and workshops for individuals with disabilities. Mark's memoir, Living in the Dark, Loving in the Light, became a bestseller. It wasn't just a story of overcoming blindness and betrayal. It was a celebration of resilience and the transformative power of trust and love. The book resonated deeply with readers, leading to invitations for Mark to speak at schools, corporations, and international conferences. Emily's work expanded as well. She and Mark co-founded a nonprofit called Vision Beyond Sight, dedicated to empowering people with disabilities through education, mentorship, and resources. The organization quickly gained recognition for its innovative programs, like tactile art classes, adaptive sports leagues, and mental health support groups tailored for individuals with disabilities and their families. One of their proudest achievements was launching a scholarship program for visually impaired students. The first recipient, a young woman named Alina, spoke at the program's inaugural event. "Mark and Emily," Alina said, her voice trembling with emotion, "you've given me more than financial support. You've shown me what's possible when you refuse to let limitations define you. I'm going to college not just to study, but to prove that I can achieve anything." Mark sat in the audience, tears streaming down his face. Emily squeezed his hand, her pride evident. Moments like this reminded them why they had turned their pain into a platform for change. As their nonprofit grew, so did their personal lives. They adopted a dog, a lively golden retriever named Sunny, who quickly became a beloved member of their family. Sunny's playful energy filled the house with joy, and he became a therapy dog for their nonprofit events, offering comfort to those in need. One day, as they sat on their porch enjoying the sound of chirping birds and the gentle rustle of leaves, Emily turned to Mark with a thoughtful expression. "Have you ever thought about having kids?" she asked softly. Mark smiled, his fingers brushing hers. "I have, but I was waiting for the right time and the right person." He paused. "Do you think we're ready?" Emily laughed. "If we can run a nonprofit, inspire a community, and survive Sunny's chewing phase, I think we can handle anything." A year later, they welcomed a baby girl into their lives. They named her Hope, a tribute to the journey that had brought them to this moment. Hope grew up surrounded by love, learning from her parents the importance of compassion, resilience, and giving back to others. Mark's blindness didn't hinder his role as a father. He found unique ways to bond with Hope, from creating sensory games to reading bedtime stories in Braille. Emily often watched them together, her heart swelling with gratitude for the life they had built. Their home became a beacon of inspiration. Visitors often left with a renewed sense of purpose, touched by the love and strength that radiated from Mark and Emily. As the years passed, their legacy continued to grow. Mark's speeches and Emily's advocacy sparked global conversations about inclusivity and the power of human connection. Together, they proved that even in the face of darkness, love and determination could illuminate the world. And through it all, Mark and Emily never lost sight of what mattered most: the bond they had forged, the lives they had touched, and the hope they had nurtured in themselves and others. As Hope grew, she became a reflection of the values Mark and Emily had instilled in her: compassion, resilience, and a desire to make a difference. By the time she was in high school, Hope was already a force to be reckoned with. She had inherited her parents' determination and combined it with her own unique talents. One day, after a family dinner filled with laughter and sunny napping under the table, Hope approached her parents with an idea. "Mom, Dad," she began, her tone serious yet excited, "I've been thinking about how we can expand vision beyond sight. We've done so much for people with disabilities, but there's another group we could help: kids who have parents with disabilities." Mark leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean, Hope?" Hope smiled, her enthusiasm shining through. "I've seen how amazing you both are, and how you've taught me to navigate the world with understanding and empathy. But not every kid with a parent who has a disability gets that kind of guidance. Some might feel isolated or unsure of how to support their parents. I want to create a program where kids like me can connect, share their experiences, and learn how to celebrate their parents' strengths instead of focusing on the challenges." Emily's eyes welled with tears as she reached out to squeeze Hope's hand. "That's a beautiful idea, sweetheart. I think it could make a huge difference." Mark nodded, his voice full of pride. "You're already making an impact just by thinking about this, Hope. Let's work on it together." Over the next year, the family collaborated to launch Bridges of Hope, a branch of their nonprofit focused on supporting children of parents with disabilities. The program offered workshops, mentorship, and creative outlets for kids to express their feelings and build a community. At the inaugural event, Hope stood on stage, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Growing up, I never saw my dad's blindness as a limitation. He's taught me more about strength and love than I could ever put into words. And my mom has shown me that advocacy is the greatest form of love. Through Bridges of Hope, I want every kid to feel what I felt, that their parents are heroes, not because of what they've lost, but because of what they've given." The audience erupted in applause, and Mark and Emily couldn't have been prouder. As Bridges of Hope grew, it attracted attention from educators, psychologists, and policymakers. Hope's vision of bridging gaps in understanding inspired collaborations with schools and community organizations worldwide. Meanwhile, Mark and Emily continued their work with Vision Beyond Sight, which had now expanded to multiple countries. Their joint efforts brought tactile resources to underserved communities, implemented accessibility policies in workplaces, and created platforms for individuals with disabilities to share their stories. Years later, as Hope graduated college with a degree in social work, she stood beside her parents at an event honoring Vision Beyond Sight's 25th anniversary. The nonprofit had changed thousands of lives, but Mark and Emily knew their proudest achievement was a compassionate, driven young woman standing beside them. During his speech that evening, Mark reflected on the journey that had brought them there. "Life isn't defined by the challenges we face," he said. "It's defined by how we rise, how we rebuild, and how we choose to see the world, not with our eyes, but with our hearts. My family has shown me that even in darkness, love and hope can light the way for us all." The room stood in a standing ovation, a testament to the legacy Mark, Emily, and Hope had built together, a legacy of love, resilience, and the belief that every challenge is an opportunity to shine.